Started recording. Hi, my name is Raf, and with me I have Jeff and I have Blair. And our group 1.11, we decided to do the Integrated Project Delivery or IPD. So yeah, let's get started. So before we start into it, just an intro about what we're going to be discussing for about the next 20 minutes. We're going to be defining what integrated project delivery is with its principles, key components, and elements, some involvement with the work parties and networking, and comparing IPD to traditional construction methods like design, build, construction management, and the like. And last but not least, we're going to look at the benefits and the deficits of IPD, both the project outcomes and the case studies. So yeah, I hope you guys will enjoy, sit back and relax, and here we go. So, integrated project delivery or IPD is an approach that integrates all aspects, people, systems, practices into a collaborative effort. And because we're doing that, we are optimizing project results, increasing value to the owner, and to maximize efficiency to all phases of the project. The collaborative approach of IPD is very different from the traditional methods of construction. For example, in the world of construction, there are silos when it comes to project management, sorry. The owner is at the top, then the design and the builders are being told what to do in more or less of like a hierarchy, a silo. But however, the owner is being told sorry, the owner is telling the architect and the builder what to do without really knowing in detail the feasibility and the knowledge of what happens during the design process. IPD, however, takes all of those parties that are involved with the project and takes all of their knowledge and expertise into consideration even before the construction starts. That way, there is already an increase in efficiency and a thorough in detail planning, both financially and during construction. And so now we're just going into the key elements and principles of IPD. So in IPD, we have this idea called a multi-party contract. That means every at-risk party signs a contract. So a primary contract would consist of the owner, the primary designer, the architect, or the primary builder, which is like the construction manager or the general manager. Other parties like electrical and the electrical, structural, steel, they sign subcontracts created by the architect and the general contractor. And last but not least, we have this single contract amount including contingency. What that means is that when an at-risk party signs a subcontract, they put in a lump of sum of money straight away into the project and put that sum at risk. What that is used for, we'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation. But because IPD is a collaborative, there are contingencies or backups in place just in case that if an at-risk party involved goes over budget. If that's the case, then other parties in that project can help overcome that difference through their own savings. So more or less, there is this mutual safety net so that parties can proceed with the project without having any major drawbacks. And since IPD is a relatively new system and approach to construction, it is also implementing lean concepts and practices. What lean is, the five principles are listed onto the screen. I'm not going to go into too much detail about it, but basically what it means is it creates this open communication with between parties in a project, defines the value, and creates more or less like a step by step throughout each phases of construction, design, and closeout. So that way it establishes a flow, a smooth workflow throughout all phases of construction. And last but not least, they also have lessons learned concerning about what went wrong, what went right, and what can be improved. And as a result, a culture of collaboration is developed, and collaboration is absolutely key when it comes to IPD. And so, a little bit more about key elements is that there is a collaborative decision making. What that means is that there are key members that come together and communicate what needs to be done in a step by step process. Everyone contributes and helps out one another by pulling their own weight and sharing information. This involvement helps create early and achievable short-term goals to set up the long-term goals of the project rather nicely. Like who doesn't like a smooth workflow? This really helps with proficiency and morale when everything and everyone is working smoothly and without congestion. Open communication allows parties to freely talk with one another. I'll give you an example. Say I need to talk with Blair about something concerning a project, but instead of talking to Blair directly, I have to talk to Jeff, which needs to talk to Blair. Just like the game telephone, information can be misconstrued and miscommunicated if you go through too many telephone lines. If you go through too many people, the information that I need might get misconstrued and I might get a different answer based on what Jeff tells Blair, right? It's not direct, it's not a clear line of communication. So that way, when we have this open communication in IPD, there is less of a chance of a miscommunication and less of a chance of an error due to that miscommunication. And lastly, we have a very early and thorough phasing plan, and IPD specializes in a special type of financial organization that we're going to talk about later. So let me paint you a picture about what the parties involved and how IPD makes decisions, right? There needs to be a leading factor or a consensus around IPD. So let's say you have your owner, or your primary designer, your architect, or your primary builder, along with some representatives of the owner and 2 or 3 representatives for both the architect and the CM or GM. These are your key participants. These are the people that make the decision through a consensus. If a consensus cannot be made within this group of people, there is an executive team that meets with each representative of each key participant, and then they make the decision based on the information that they're given. After the core group, we have the trade partners and the suppliers in the outer ring. The decisions, made by the core group are then distributed to all members that are involved with the project. So what that looks like is all parties are understanding and sharing knowledge about the decisions being made by the key participants. And moving on, instead of the only oh my goodness, instead of only the owner, designer, and builder designing a contract, all parties involved have to sign some form of contract. I mentioned this earlier. They have to they have to sign and agree to some form of subcontract made by the architect or the construction manager. This way, all parties are liable to each other with the IPD method, and this forms like a form of trust, and everybody pulls their own weight. Everything is based on mutual respect and trust that everybody knows what they're doing and everybody is pulling their weight. And that results in that early distribution of knowledge and expertise. And so lastly, I just have some benefits and deficits, basically a synopsis of what I just discussed with you guys. And yeah, this is just a summary of everything that I just talked about: open communication, traditional silos removed, and the financial performance based on the overall project. And some things I added at the end of both the deficit and the benefit table is finishing months before schedule and lower chance of a communication. And I've been leading up to this and risking 100% profit in a lump of sum amount. And yeah, the deficits are already there if you want to take a look. But the one very risk and reward type of thing I want to talk about is this. It's the risk and reward pool. We're going to go into detail about this with Blair, but I just wanted to introduce this concept to you guys so it's not a completely new and abstract thing. So what a risk and reward pool does is that they sign a contract, like IPD sends a contract set to a maximum estimated price, or EMP. So what that means is that is all the design costs and construction costs and contingency that we talked about earlier. Once a party signs that contract, they agree to put their lump of sum amount profit into a pool for that EMP and puts 100% of that at risk. So that means if that EMP is exceeded, no profit is made and the owner pays for the cost of the work, no matter how expensive it is. That's the risk part. The reward part is even sweeter. The reward part, if the EMP is not exceeded, we get our lump of sum in the EMP divided by the total amount of the pool. What that means, I'm going to give Blair that in a little bit, but please expect this risk and reward pool to be one of the biggest factors of IPD. So yeah, that's all I have to talk about. Thank you for listening to me, and I will pass it on to Jeff.
Hey, thanks, Raf. Let's try this again. I'm going to be doing comparisons from the traditional project delivery methods to IPD, and the traditional traditional delivery method that is most likely used is design, bid, build. It's the most prevalent delivery method. This one, owner enters into separate contracts with architect and a contractor. This is where you can see in the solid lines off in my diagram to the right. Project developed with little or no input from parties constructing the project. Information is only shared and gathered when needed, and this method encourages a very much unilateral effort between parties. The dotted line in the diagram represents communication, but I think it's dotted because it's not as solid as some other delivery methods. Yeah, this delivery method is not working that well. Okay, comparing design, bid, build to IPD. So I'm going to start with teams. In design, bid, build, the design, bid, build is fragmented and strongly tiered. Teams only put together when necessary, and they consist of pretty much exclusively just the owner, the architect, and the contractor. Besides the times in these groups, there's very minimal communication between the three of them. Like I said, there's communication one way with each other, but not all three altogether. In IPD, the collaborative team developed early in the project. This leads to a high level of teamwork and communication between the owner, architect, and contractor. And this is constant communication as opposed to design, bid, build. It's not just when needed. And also, these teams include communication from other groups like key stakeholders and anybody else that is involved or interested in the project. It requires the trust and sharing of the knowledge between parties, like Raf said before. Now I'm going to touch on risk for the comparison. Design, bid, build, it's very individually managed. Risk on the project is not divided and shared among the parties involved, and risk is always transferred as much as possible. So an example of that design, bid, build would be a contractor giving a job to a subcontractor, so they don't have to do that portion of the project and thus transferring the risk away from themselves. In IPD, the project risk is shared and managed collectively as a group. And again, like Raf was talking about, the amount of risk each group accepts depends on the type of scope of project. Just this diagram at the bottom, you can see maybe the kind of typical percentages a project would be divided into, and they're all sharing that risk, the 100%. They're all taking their part of the risk. Differences in communication technology. The design, build tends to be very slow communication and outdated technology. It's lots of information, it's paper-based and two-dimensional. This can cause issues and inefficiencies when info on a project needs to be shared or viewed. You might have to go to the one building because it's only on paper. You can't just all log in and see what you need to see. As opposed to an IPD, it's fast, digitally based, and mostly virtual. It uses things like building information modeling for 3+ dimensional drawings, designs, and building details. So you can see the design there, or the diagram there. That's kind of a picture of what BIM, or building information modeling, can do. As you can see, that's much more complex than, say, a two-dimensional sheet of paper that people are looking at on a desk. With the BIM, you can really get in and look around and see details of how things fit together, and yeah, it can make some of the projects a lot more easy to work with. Acknowledgements. Design, build, it's very individual. It's focused on individual successes. It's minimal effort for the maximum return, usually first cost-based delivery method. However, in IPD, team success is indicated through project success. It's rewarded based on accepted risk, accepted at early involvement, and it's value-based delivery method as opposed to the first cost base of design, build. So I like this graph. It's just kind of a summary of some of the comparisons. So the blue line there is the IPD, and the brown line represents the traditional design process or design build. So some of the main takeaways I take away from this is that with the blue graph or the blue line, sorry, you can see how early the design effort and effect is as opposed to the design build. So it starts way before that, and then that given on the end, you can see this top white line coming from the top left to bottom right, the ability to impact cost and functional capabilities. This is also a huge advantage for IPD because it's kind of done and it's out of that area where design build is kind of at its peak when the cost of design changes and the ability to impact cost and functional capabilities kind of meet. So those are both kind of the highest, whereas the IPD process kind of misses the major part of both of those that could be pretty detrimental to a project. So the early buy-in definitely is not easy, and it takes a lot of trust and sharing, but it definitely can have its advantages later on. Just to mention some drawbacks of IPD. It cannot be easily integrated into other select delivery methods due to necessary early involvement from parties. So it could be integrated to some methods, but those methods are already likely not very used. So when you're talking about a likely used delivery method such as design build, IPD really doesn't. You can't merge them and try to do the best of both worlds because of that early start of IPD. Because design build, it's all about the owner and the architect for so long. And then once they bring the contractor, that's already a lot further down, and then everybody else is further from there. So the IPD of everybody starting together is really, you really can't change that, and you can't really put that in design build, unfortunately. Like we've mentioned, it requires complete trust and confidence between parties involved. Otherwise, IPD can regress into more traditional delivery method, which would be awful if you go in with an IPD mindset, and then because people don't trust or because people aren't comfortable with the new method, that people start not trusting and sharing, and people do their own thing. So then you're kind of regressing, and then it kind of defeats the whole purpose of trying to do a project with IPD. And kind of on the same note, difficulties in financing, designing, and contracting can arise because some parties are not comfortable with IPD. They're not familiar with new approaches, and they might refuse to participate. So it could be kind of hard to get off the ground if you're trying to push IPD with or a project with IPD as opposed to the normal design build. So it has its benefits, but still faces a lot of tough times with trying to become more of a used method of delivery as opposed to just relying on the design build. And I think with that, I'll hand it over to Blair.
All right, thanks, Jeff.
Yep.
So I will be looking at a couple case studies, and then I'll be concluding and summarizing and wrapping this thing up. So case study number one that I looked at was a healthcare facility, and the total cost of this project was $114 million. And as you can see by this pie chart on the right, it's split up all the okay. Split up all the different trades as far as what could they do and as a percentage and stuff like that, and that affects the risk pool. And so the risk pool, the bonus pool, that is in this particular project is $4.4 million, and that's a total amount of profit that's available in there. It's calculated based on percentage that you put into the pool and like what you contribute to the job. So as an example, you might have a general contractor who puts in 2.6 million, and that's because he had 59% of that piece of the pie. So that 2.6 million goes into the pool of profit, and so when the job is completed, he'll get 59 cents on every dollar of reward that was created. Two big important factors that are involved in this case study that I just by reading through all the stuff, I'm just going to try summarizing it for you guys, is that they used a big room to facilitate the effective communication. Now, I won't get into the big room too much because there's another group doing that, but it's a very key component that facilitates a lot of meetings and also the staff that's working there as well. So you're going to have all of your planning meetings there. So like that'll be all your construction activities. That'll be for the following week or the previous week, you could be going over like how much percent complete you are done on a particular project and all the different phases. And it also is well-defined commitments are tracked by the area and the company as well that's doing the work, the subcontractor. You'll also be doing some cost forecasting in there as well, and you'll be hopefully using some good technology like building information modeling. I won't get into that because another group is doing that as well, but it's a very effective tool that allows your team to move very efficiently. And the last thing on here is the last planner. It's a tool for scheduling stuff. So I just took a screenshot of an example that I saw from this particular project, and there's a lot of items in it. I don't expect you to read all that or anything. It's just basically it's just something that's used to schedule all of your projects. And so to sum up the results for this survey, this case study that was done, they completed it 10 weeks ahead of schedule for the construction, and the business was able to open 3 months ahead of schedule. There was a bonus pool of $585,000 that paid out as per that pie chart that I showed you. And 100% of the $14 million that was put into contingency was returned to the owner. I looked at another case study, and it was called IPD survey, and it's pretty simple. They just surveyed people that had finished using IPD, and it was spread out over 59 projects. There's 108 people involved in this survey, and they really only asked 3 questions. There were some additional questions, but the 3 main questions that they asked in this survey were the comparison of IPD versus non-IPD, median of expectations of the project, and likelihood of the future use of IPD. So the results were actually quite significantly positive for the IPD as a superior delivery method across all of them, except for maybe the architects. The architects were a little bit lower. They weren't too happy with the IPD, but they were still happy with it. Owners had the highest positive response in all of the surveys that I looked at. The other ones were kind of in the middle, and they're listed below, like stakeholders, different project types, progress, average, and past experience. Another thing that they brought up was in the survey was why IPD, like why was IPD chosen? And it was chosen because it increased productivity and there's less paperwork involved, fewer RFIs and conflicts. They had informed decision making, better cost control, and improved budget management. They minimized waste and effective use of resource and control over construction processes and scopes. So to go into this with a little bit more detail, and to kind of sum up what Jeff was saying and what Raf was saying, one thing that happens is you do a lot more pre-work. Like before you start any construction, there's a lot more effort put into the design phase. And so if you have all of the people there that are going to be involved in the project and you have a 3D system and you're able to answer all the questions, like just imagine you have a meeting and normally how it goes is you have like the designers and you'll have 1 or 2 of the trades that you're talking about a specific thing. Well, you run into problems because all the systems are interrelated, right? And if you don't have all the trades there, you're going to have certain barriers where you can't go past. And then it just slows the whole process down, right? So when you have everybody together at the beginning phases, you're able to move through and have a much more efficient system. So it is a higher upfront cost, but it pays out in the end because there's less revisions and less mistakes and less issues. So what I summarized here is the key factors for success, looking through all those reports. And so what I saw was effective communication was really the #1 key factor for success. They all had common goals, and shared vision was another really important factor. Some other factors that came out were that the people liked was open-mindedness, flexibility, active listening, respect, trust, and teamwork. So I'm showing you guys this graph here. It's called a contingency tracking chart, and this kind of sums up what happens with IPD. And I know it's kind of small fonts and it's kind of hard to read, so I'll do my best to explain it to you. So basically, what this graph tracks is the cost of a project over time, and that's on the bottom scale there. In relationship to the financial terms set up by the IPD agreement. At the center of the graph is a thin black line. I'll point to that. And that shows the original cost estimate of the work without the contingency. The zone between the dotted red line, right up in here, and the blue line is the middle. It indicates where the IPD team will receive 20% of any savings as profit. Now the area down here, that makes up 80% of the savings as profit. So if the expenses exceed the red line up here, then there's no profit for the team. But if the expenses drop below this green line, then any additional savings are kept by the owner. This purple line right here, that's the actual cost of the project as it's going along. So there's a lot of room for profit as you increase your efficiencies. So in conclusion, the IPD is a delivery method of collaboration and contracts. It has a shared vision and common goals from the owner down to the trades. And it's owner-driven system focused on results, and technology integration is key for success. So while you guys are taking a look at these references, I just wanted to say one last thing about this is, integrated project delivery, is it a lasting trend or is it just a passing fad? The term may fade away and be replaced by the newest way to describe collaboration. However, people working together with a shared vision and common goal will always be much greater than any individual working alone. Equip these teams with technology to improve their efficiencies and remove the shackles of contracts that create wrong behaviors and replace them with contracts that incentivize behaviors and benefits the goals of the team. Is this ahead on the horizon for the construction industry? Or is it in the rearview mirror and going to be replaced by an even better system? I don't know. So that concludes our presentation. Thank you for your time.